Very nice, man.
History is the collection of everybody's history.
My name is Jared McKenzie. I teach grade 7 Humanities at Connect Charter School.
My name is Rick Fawcett, and I'm a grade 7 Humanities teacher here at Connect Charter School in Calgary. The iHistory is really a remix, if you will, of a previous project called the Family Artifact Project.
And in that project we had students research an important artifact of their family's history and create a little iMovie. And we liked the project, but we felt like it didn't have the same type of value that we were aiming for.
This year we decided we were going to really bring an emphasis to what it means to be a historian and to think like a historian.
As opposed to just documentarians. We wanted them to create their own information and learn their own stories from their family's past and then share it with us. But the focus was on the historical skills, not the documentary so much.
Using the Historical Thinking Project as our model, we introduced and practiced 6 different historical thinking skills and strategies with our students.
And we wanted to use those skills and teach the skills to the students so that they could access historical information just like a historian would.
So after we introduced the 6 historical thinking skills, we practiced them by looking at more well-known examples from history and tried to unpack them using things like finding primary sources or looking at how can we reserve ethical judgment for things in the past that, you know, from today's standards they might be considered pretty terrible, but how do you manage that knowing what we know now versus what people knew when that time period was going on. So as the students were completing their project and working through their research, they were responsible for sharing with us and providing very clear evidence of how they were using these historical thinking strategies for their documentary.
Yeah, I didn't really think there was like a whole historical way of thinking because, well, I thought maybe there was one type of thinking. Deepened my understanding of how you can think.
One way parents played a role in this project was by helping their child brainstorm potential ideas for the project. We created a planner which challenged students to come up with 3 potential stories.
Over 100 years ago, I find it remarkable that my great-great-grandpa and his entire family managed to get from Ireland to Calgary.
My great-great-aunt, she survived all the cold, harsh conditions of Siberia.
When my ancestors were in the US, but then the men had to go up to Canada during the War of 1812.
My grandma overcame challenges when she was kidnapped during World War II.
Once the students had identified the story that they wanted to tell based on which story fit the 6 criteria of historical thinking first, then they had to conduct an interview with a family member. And most of the students were able to do it in person. Some students have to do it over the phone or via Skype, but fortunately the technology allowed them to gain access to their family members.
I Skyped my grandpa. I told him the questions. I gave him a little time to think about them. And then I took my iPad, I videotaped me asking the questions to him, and then he answered, and then I put it all into my iMovie.
With the interview, we wanted students to realize that there's going to be somebody in their family who's kind of like the key holder of your family knowledge, and then we wanted the students to craft questions that were really going to elicit the information they needed to get for their story. So it wasn't just like walking in to see your grandfather and saying, "Tell me about the 1920s." Instead, we planned for students to create questions and to figure out what it was they wanted to know from this person and figure out strategies to access that information from them.
I wanted ones that will give me the most information about how his struggles and if he was going to, how he overcame them.
I interviewed someone from the Gumbo Museum. She worked in the archives, and I chose to interview her because she was kind of an outside voice on it, and she had a different perspective than I did, and it opened up my thoughts.
Our students had compiled a wealth of information about their event, their historical story, through the interview as well as through independent research. And we found this documentary on the National Film Board website, and so we viewed it with our students, and then we stopped and talked about what made that documentary so good. And from that, we created a criteria that really set the goals for us. And that movie, although a few decades old, really did a nice job of showing all the elements that go into creating a powerful documentary. And along the way, we helped them understand the need for planning these things. They don't just happen by accident. They're very deliberate decisions. And that actually constituted a lot of our assessment of the documentary. People who watch these videos will be struck by just how professional and refined they look. There are many examples of documentaries that our students produced that just hit all the right notes. The music is there, the emotion is there, the images, the video, all of the artistic choices made seem right. They seem focused on establishing a theme while explaining the significance of an event. I could go on and on about how impressed I was, and it didn't come by accident. It was thoughtfully planned throughout.
They moved beyond being those passive consumers of information. They were acquiring the content, and then through video and audio files and graphics, they created a very dynamic story that couldn't be told in any other way. You know, you look at a lot of students and they want to think about the bells and whistles of a project, the glitz and glamour, but they really use the technology to create a feeling, to enhance the project. And so there was mood that was created in this, and that couldn't have been done using any other medium. It was very powerful.
It was very important for us that the assessment assessed what it was that we were intentionally teaching. And the research, the thinking, the planning, and the creativity all played a significant part in our assessment strategy.
How can we assess the road as we go, and how can we assess the thinking of our students as opposed to what it was they produced?
By collecting evidence along the way, we were able to paint a more accurate overall assessment of their work.
What we really wanted to do is we wanted to pay attention to three key phases in the assessment process. The first one was the planning, where we had to have students reflect upon their thinking and show us their evidence of how these stories could meet their 6 dimensions of historical thinking. Throughout their midpoint of the project, we would have opportunities for check-ins and reflections for students to let us know what they were thinking about their project. And the check-ins were structured in such a way that they weren't just tell me how this is going. Instead, they were, how are you showing evidence of historical thinking, or how are you showing evidence of strong communication? How are you showing evidence of a title that's created that invites an audience member into understanding your theme? For your interview questions, same thing. How is your interview questions going to get the information you need to get from this family member? Why did you choose the music that you chose? How does that help or hinder your theme that you're trying to bring across? The big impetus for us was that students would be able to reveal their intentions to us, so that we would know why they were making these decisions. Sometimes when we have a large project, it can be kind of foggy for us to determine, why did the student make this choice? And was this a choice they made intentionally and purposefully, and did it help their project, or was it a choice that they just stumbled upon? And we wanted to really parse that out and determine why they made these choices.
When students received their final rubric, there really were no surprises, and that was our intention. We wanted them to understand how they were going as they were going.
It wasn't a technology project, right? This was about authentic history. And I think what surprised me is how much I was moved by the stories that the students were sharing. This wasn't history from a textbook, this was a lived experience. And the way the students could grab onto that and understand how that affected Alberta history or Canadian history was extremely powerful. I've never seen a better example. It was very rich and authentic.
History is the collection of everyone's story.